Spider-Man in the 616 is basically a sad sack, unlucky loser. And they've been continuously using this as the baseline of Peter Parker for years and years. And it's gotten very, very old and very, very tired. And Doc, while you are the X-Men aficionado, you also are an enormous Spiderhead.
While I'm not as insane about my ASM collection as I am my my Uncanny X-Men collection, I got as many, if not more, Spider-Man books than I do Uncanny X-Men books, because I got issues about 297 through 900.
So you've got your Spider-Man bona fides, and there were a couple of articles, one from just a few weeks ago, and then one from all the way back in, I think, 2016 or 17. Now, we'll admit, I'm a little bit more bullish than some of these guys. I do think there were parts of the Nick Spencer run that were really strong, but it was very start and stop. You would get to somewhere, then you would stop and go do something else, and then come back to it. And then there was a short period of Spectacular Spider-Man where it was pretty good, but that wasn't even the mainline book anyway.
It's very rare that stuff in the secondary or tertiary Spider-Man books actually matters to Spider-Man. What matters is what happens in Amazing Spider-Man. It's the way it's always been. It's the way it always will be.
For the most part, yeah. And then we had a guy, his name is Nicholas Scagnelli, and he's just got like a blog. I guess he's in school studying English. He's an English major or whatever. So this is the audience, at least the age of the audience, that Marvel wants to be attracting. And recently he had a blog post talking about his issues with modern Spider-Man going all the way back to 2005. Spidey's modern comics suck. There's no progression for the characters. He's in his 30s. He's got no wife. He's failing at every turn. He's just a damn loser. The current Spidey comics are just the writers making Peter's life miserable. It's disheartening as hell to read. There's no damn hope for the loyal fans. And I think a lot of people agree with that. Like, the Zeb Wells run has been awful. It feels like he just wants to make Peter Parker as miserable as possible, and they're making the fans miserable as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the double-edged sword. I get it that they want to keep that like kind of lovable loser feel to Spider-Man because that's how they grew up. You know, when he was 15, 16, he was in high school, he was in college, having the girl troubles, money troubles, all this other stuff. But the problem is he's still aged. The Marvel sliding timeline puts him at about 31, 32, maybe 33 now. Now he's a 30-year-old man that can't keep a job, has no girlfriend, no wife, no career. His friends kind of hate him half the time. That makes him a fucking loser at 30. And now you can't have your main marquee superhero for the entire company a loser at 30 and make people still love the guy.
Yeah, he's almost in a state of arrested development where he's just this man-child just kind of like sitting there, not really doing anything. And his relationships are always being ruined, but he doesn't really seem to care anymore. It's not like he goes out there and is trying to fix these things or make things right. You know, he goes off on some no-stakes adventure every once in a while, and that's basically what the comic book is. Like, the fabric of Spider-Man has always been, obviously, the action and him fighting villains, but it's always also been about the interpersonal relationships and all that stuff. And it feels like nobody cares about that. It feels really like, I guess, Dan Slott was the first one that really had Arrested Development, projected that onto Spider-Man, and he's just never going to get out of it now.
You have to be able to move a character like that forward. He has to, at some point, get out of his own fucking way and start being an actual adult if you want people to still care about him. When they just keep him essentially acting like he's 22 again, you start to lose the reader.
But since they can't allow the character to go forward, there's nothing really they can do with him, so they just continuously rely on nostalgia. This is what Comics Island had to say about that all the way back in 2016. Too often, nostalgia is overused in Spider-Man. Characters constantly parrot old famous lines and moments and are kept around with no purpose. Nostalgia really detracts from Spider-Man, especially when it gets out of hand. Spider-Man just can't be the exact same way forever because there's no real story to speak of. And we're constantly getting fed the same stories over and over. We just had Gang War, a rehash of a story that we'd already seen. We just had Dark Web where they included Spider-Man in there, you know, a rehash of an X-Men story that we'd already seen. And we're just getting the same stories over and over and over. Guess what we're getting next? The return of the Green Goblin. Guess what we're getting along with that? The return of the Sinister Six. And they just go back to this nostalgia well because it does sell covers, and, you know, people do have fond memories of a lot of these great Spider-Man moments, but he can't have any new great Spider-Man moments.
No one gives a damn because all you're doing is going into, nostalgia territory. Like I kind of understood it, in 2016 when they were doing it, because they wanted to take the focus off Peter, because they really did want to try to make Miles the big superhero, give him the stories, give him the action, give him everything else, let Spider-Man be essentially on his retirement greatest hits tour. The first part of that plan never worked out because nobody gave a shit about Miles. And the second part can only go for so long before people get tired. Even in his, I guess you can say, lull period of the late 70s up until the mid 80s, even then they were still covering new ground. They were treading new ground. They were introducing new villains. Yeah, not many of them stuck around, but you can only rely on the villains from the first 30 issues of Spider-Man for so fucking long before people get tired of seeing it for the 45th time.
How many times can I see Kraven's Last Hunt? We're on his kid, but a clone of the kid, because we killed off so many Kravens now that we're on a copy of a copy of a copy at this point. How many different versions of a goblin can we have? We got the Gold Goblin came out within the last 12 months, I think. Before that, we had the Red Goblin. It's like there's only so many goblins that can be associated with the Osborn family before the shit's just played out.
You brought up the Ben Reilly thing before. That whole thing with Ben Reilly and him coming back. First, they brought him back as the Jackal in the Clone Conspiracy. And then they brought him back again as Spider-Man, and then essentially just turned him into, they just rehashed the fucking Venom origin. Even gave him a Venom-esque costume when they renamed him Chasm. Look, all you're doing is nostalgia bait. I get it. You're trying to balance what the old readers want and what the current readers or what editorial thinks is moving in a forward direction. The problem is your forward directions suck. You're a bad cover band playing someone else's greatest hits.
I think old fans and new fans of Spider-Man can all agree on they want Peter Parker back with MJ. That's why I think a lot of people have been drawn to Ultimate Spider-Man. It does have Jonathan Hickman. It does have Marco Cicchetto, but it has something people have been looking for. This is what they were talking about even 7 years ago. The era where Spider-Man had a wife wasn't perfect, not by any means, but it had something the modern era didn't. There's always something you could come back to because Peter's family mattered, and they had important things to say about his superhero career. There was a heart to that era that made things a lot easier to read through. These days, there's nothing to come back to with Spider-Man. He lives a shallow and empty life. He's alone and doesn't really acknowledge this or seems to even mind. And this is in direct contrast to the Peter Parker that has been long established in the comic books.
The whole Zeb Wells run, it started out with all of his friends and all of his family fucking hates him. And because he realized partway through, this is a terrible paradigm for Peter Parker, and I don't have anything to write stories about if all of his friends and family hate him. Well, we can't tell them why, because that would spoil our big mystery, the dumbest mystery in the history of Amazing Spider-Man comics.
Oh, that he caused a big hole in the middle of nowhere so he could go and save Mary Jane, who then resented him for it.
Yes, exactly. Everybody hated him for that. They didn't bother to actually write the people getting over it. They just kind of just all suddenly got over it and were less of a dick to Peter for like 3 issues, and then suddenly everything was back to normal. No, like he needs to have a supporting cast, and having that wife to come home to, having his superheroing screw up the plans that MJ had for, dinner with one of her college friends that she hasn't seen in a number of years. It's supposed to be a double date. Stuff like that, the kind of normal everyday stuff that married couples or people in a serious relationship have to deal with. That stuff actually was important to us. We liked being able to see it. They've made him such a walking punchline. I mean, not even a punchline, just kind of this like sad cautionary tale of what not to do with your marquee superhero. But instead of actually walking back that terrible road that you went down and finding a way to reset it back to something that everybody actually liked, they're going to keep trying to find the MJ replacement. They've tried it with guys, with girls. They've tried it with a combination of guys and girls. It's just really annoying after a while, and we're fucking tired of it.
And these aren't new problems. This is what that article had to say, like the last word on Peter Parker as Spider-Man in 2016, 7 years ago. Peter Parker has morphed from an affable, compassionate everyman to one that strikes me as fundamentally self-serving and cut off from the rest of the world. This makes for a pretty terrible protagonist overall. If we don't care about Peter, we don't care about the story. And these days, I just don't care about Spider-Man. I like the character in principle, and I try to enjoy him when he is done well, but it sure feels like at the ripe old age of 55, the one true Spider-Man has fallen, and he can't get up.
People grow up. They're refusing to either grow up the character or grow up themselves because editorial is stuck in the same nostalgia bait time capsule that they argue that the readership is. You, editorial, Nick Lowe, Joe Quesada when you were still there, Tom Brever, and Dan Slott, you guys are the ones that are actually stuck in Arrested Development because you can't get over the fact that Gwen's fucking dead and that he ended up with MJ. He grew up, he got married, and he had a happy marriage. That's what happens with aspirational characters at 30. That's what they do.
They're leaving a lot of money on the table. You know, obviously, Ultimate Spider-Man is doing great. They've only gotten 3 issues out of it. They could have gotten 10 years out of it at this point. I'm sure you saw the covers from J. Scott Campbell honoring kind of like his 3 best-known Spider-Man covers he ever did for ASM. He's making variants of those for Ultimate Spider-Man number 4. You got Mary Jane in front of the window, Peter Parker laying on her lap with her 2 kids there looking like a happy family. And everybody that I know that has seen that cover has been like, God damn, that's what I wanted this whole time.
Exactly. And instead of him making out with Black Cat and MJ in the background being all sad, this time he's making out with MJ and people are looking unhappy. And this time, instead of Black Cat showing off her heist, it's Peter Parker putting a pearl necklace around the neck of his wife. It's fucking adorable. And look, while they can definitely milk this in Ultimate Spider-Man for a little while, that's wonderful. It's great. But do you know what? It would work a whole hell of a lot better in and give you a whole hell of a lot more sales in Amazing Spider-Man, because that's the book that ultimately matters, that has always mattered, and that will always matter. Ultimate Spider-Man, as good as it may be, is no different than Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man, Adjectiveless Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, or any of the other titles over the years.
It's kind of worse than that. It's more like a what if.
Yes.
It's not real.
Yeah, it is. It's a what if. And yeah, you're giving us a really long what if series, but guess what? What we really want it in is the mainline book. That's where it makes money. That's where it would always make money. And that's where you'd see your biggest boost.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're getting the what if Joe Quesada and Marvel Comics didn't drop the ball on Peter Parker and MJ. And the response has been great. They're selling a lot of comic books. It's outselling Batman almost 2-1. Well, it turns out the what if is people would have been happy because it's basically the state that they wanted. It's certainly not traditional take on Spider-Man, but I'm enjoying it. And as an alternative to Amazing Spider-Man, I really do enjoy it. But, you know, even as somebody that reads as many comic books as I do, and I don't take continuity quite as seriously as you do, there's no getting around the fact that if this was in continuity, it would mean 1 billion times more to Marvel Comics than Spider-Man.
Absolutely, and it would absolutely reflect itself in sales.
I do want to say thank you very much, Doc. Now, we talked for about, 25 minutes about this on YouTube. It should be 12 to 13 minutes. If you would like the fully unedited version of this, you got to go to Thinking Critical Patreon. The Doc is right here. We'll have the Doc Unfiltered podcast, which will include this, as well as our unfiltered, unedited, uncensored review of Jackpot and Black Hat #1, which will be up on the YouTubes tomorrow.